evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. It is January 15th. It's only been 4 days since our last episode, but as always, it's Alberta politics. This seems to be getting more and more dynamic and less boring for reasons that we're going to go through in part tonight. But we're going to try to have a little bit of fun tonight. We're going to start things off a little bit light and then work our way into the mire, if you will. So to start with, we want to do things a little bit fun. Those of you who are familiar with the Alberta politics universe, and in particular the Alberta politics Twitter universe, are probably aware that one of the things that exists are some absolutely on point satire Twitter accounts. Now, most of these are labeled parody or satire, or some of them use other names. And some of them are very, very good at hitting satire so on the mark that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell what's real and what's not, especially if you're perhaps not approaching things from a bit more of a skeptical mindset. If you're somebody who perhaps looks at the internet and says, well, that's interesting, I'd like to know more, I'm not just going to believe it on face value. Now, if you're not somebody who does those sorts of things, then maybe you can find yourself getting yourself into a bit of trouble. Freedom warrior, I think, is the term he goes by now. Ex-Calgary Flame, rabbit hole conspiracy theorist. Some people have used the word grifter because he sells t-shirts to the Freedom folks now. He bought it hook, line, and sinker. One of the best satire Twitter accounts out there, the Western Standard Pitchbot, whose name is literally Western Standard Pitchbot. Pitchbot's in there. It's in bold, bright bold letters. The Western Standard Pitchbot tweeted out, breaking as of January 1st, the cause of death for all vaccinated Albertans will automatically be identified as, air quotes, by vaccine, Alberta Health, #ABLedge. Immediately retweeted by the the master of let's go with self-research, I guess, Theo Fleury, with just the comment, huge. And it was up for a while. People had a lot of fun with it because, one of the things is if you have a difficult time telling what the truth is, what the reality is, and then you go telling on yourself by sharing a tweet from Western Standard's Pitchbot as if it's real, it was fun. It was the humorous high point of the week in a week of otherwise humorous but deeply alarming things. Now, before we get into our main topic tonight, which is, of course, Danielle Smith lies a lot, and you better believe we brought some receipts. One other thing that we wanted to make sure that we highlighted, because it is important. One of the things, really one of the only accomplishments that Danielle Smith can brag about, I guess, has to do with her Alberta Sovereignty Act, or the Free Alberta Strategy, or the Sovereign Alberta within a United Canada, even though it's just Canada, we're not united. She did a thing, the Sovereignty Act. Well, when she did the Sovereignty Act, there were a bunch of problems with it. We talked about them on the show before. One of the biggest problems, other than the gross overreach and giving herself briefly the ability to write laws without any sort of oversight, was the fact that there was little to no, if not no, consultation done with the treaty signatories that cover all of Alberta. Now, a brief little history lesson is important to really get the full context of this. All of Alberta is covered by treaties. Those treaties predate the formation of Alberta as a province. It's very important that any time the province is making rules that are going to have any kind of significant impact on those treaty signatories, that they do the appropriate kind of consultation. Not only just out of, respect and stuff, but legally too. With the Sovereignty Act, none of that happened. And there's been a lot of Indigenous and treaty leaders who have said, hey, we're going to take you to court because this is not how we do things. Our treaties are with the Crown. The rules about how we relate to Canada, and by extension of that, Alberta, is with the Crown. Y'all can't just go making up your own rules. Well, another treaty nation came out this week and said, y'all can't go making up your own rules. So Miscue, and I apologize if I'm white peopling that, Cree First Nation, they issued a letter where they said, hey, you know what? You didn't do the consultation. It's very clear that you didn't do the consultation. Your own minister didn't do the consultation. And this is a quote from the letter. Minister Rick Wilson admitted knowledge of the need to consult when he stated there was not enough consultation, and that is regrettable. To be clear, no one other than the leaders, Ms. Mikisew, again, sorry, have the authority to speak for Mikisew and be consulted on matters of such importance to our nation. Pretty clear. Yet another way, the Danielle Smith bulldozing her way through things because she wants to bulldoze her way through things has caused real problems. Because not only is this going to turn into a court challenge, it's absolutely going to cost taxpayers money, but it at a time where a lot of people are saying, hey, you know, this reconciliation thing, we should really be doing a better job of that. To turn around and do a worse job of that isn't a great look. Not just a great look. It's damaging to the province. It's damaging to the relationships. And especially given that Danielle Smith has said over and over and over again that one of her key strategies is to have strong relationships with Indigenous peoples in order to get these economic corridors that she wants to build and everything, pissing them off by disrespecting them and not consulting them isn't a great way to build those relationships. But we had us a week, didn't we? Let's get into it. Started with this.
The Independence Party of Alberta is calling on you to make good on the commitment to see the charges dropped on the pastor in question with the vaccine, public health restrictions, and things like that. Are you still planning to make good on your commitment to drop those charges?
The way our system of justice works is that we do have an independent Justice Department and independent Crown prosecutors, and I have asked them to consider all charges under the lens of, is it in the public interest to pursue? And is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? As we continue to see some of these cases go through, some of them get dropped, some of them fail, they have to consistently recalibrate. But I do want to make sure that they have an independent process for assessing that. But I ask them on a regular basis, as new cases come out, is it in the public interest to pursue? And is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? And so I'll leave the justice system to work, but I do think that's an important lens for us to be looking at these kinds of charges.
Now, whole lot to unpack in that clip. To start with, let's be clear. Danielle Smith didn't mince words. She talks to prosecutors all the time. She talks to them on a regular basis as these new cases come up. And she asks them, hey, are you thinking about these two things when you're making decisions in regards to whether or not you're going to prosecute them? Those two things being whether or not they're in the public interest and whether or not there's a likelihood of conviction. She said it right there. She speaks to them regularly. Pretty clear, one would think, except there's some problems. First problem is that's how all cases have been considered for a really long time. What Danielle Smith just described, using the metrics of whether or not something's in the public interest or whether or not there's a likelihood of conviction, that's how court cases get determined by the Crown as to whether or not they're going forward. What she just described is she said she's going to the Crown prosecutors to ask them if these things are present, when that's the bare minimum that any Crown prosecutor would go ahead with. That's their job. Like, does she set Rob Anderson's alarm clock for him in the morning to make sure that he gets up to get dressed to come to work? Because that's the level of micromanagement that we're potentially talking about here. But the bigger issue, and the reason why this turned into an absolute firestorm, is they're supposed to be separate from the government. It's critically important. We're going to hear from an expert, kind of, in a bit. But it's critically important that the government doesn't try to influence the decisions that the Crown prosecutors make in regards to what cases they're going forward with. When a government starts to say, hey, independent judiciary, we know you're independent, but we also think you should just do what we tell you, that is deeply, deeply, deeply problematic. And it's also deeply on brand for Smith, because this was one of the big concerns with the Sovereignty Act. There were a lot of people who were saying Danielle Smith and a bunch of MLAs who have no legal background, no legal knowledge, no legal training, making decisions about what is or isn't constitutional isn't something that should be happening, because that is the pure purview of the courts. But here we have Danielle Smith just a couple of days ago saying, you know what? I'm talking to the Crown prosecutors all the time. I'm making sure that they're considering these two basic things that, of course, they would be considering. Now, there's been some spin since then, but before we get into the spin, we wanted to sort of, how off-brand were these comments for Danielle Smith? There's a lot of people who said, maybe she just misspoke. Danielle Smith isn't the kind of person who would say, that she would try to influence prosecutions or that she would make blanket promises of amnesty or anything like that. Let's go all the way back to her campaign launch.
To commit to staying charges and freezing ongoing investigations against those emanating from the lockdown? And how do you plan to restore faith in the courts and in politics?
Yes, we have to. We never should have come down on pastors the way we did. Every other jurisdiction, it seems, we're able to enforce their measures without putting pastors in jail, and it's created so much division in our communities. So yes, we should drop those. We should also drop charges against small businesses. Part of the reason why we're enjoying the freedoms that we have today and the ability to go and watch hockey games is because there were some courageous people who stood up and said, you know what, there's another way to do this. Enough is enough. It took the politicians a little while longer to realize that, but now that they've realized that, I think part of the healing process is to make sure that some of those charges are dropped.
You heard it right at the beginning. She was point blank asked, would you get rid of these charges? Would you do the blanket amnesty? First word out of her mouth, yes. And then she went on to sing the praises of the freedom fighters who refused to wear masks and stuff because reasons, I guess. Pretty on brand, though. She's pretty clear. That was her campaign launch. Let's maybe check in during her campaign. How did things go? Did her views evolve at all, or was she still holding on to this? No, we gotta free the pastors, do the pardons, do all the things.
Reason why we ever should have arrested pastors, and we've arrested 3 of them. In other parts of the country, they find pastors, but most of those, through the help of the JCCF, have been thrown out of court. There was pastors in Manitoba that had $50,000 worth of fines. Finally, now the courts are catching up and they've thrown it out. We've got to give amnesty to every person who we subjected to that unreasonable law enforcement. And we need to give compensation as well. Pastor Coates was in jail for 4 weeks, as was Art Podolsky, I think 51 days. Unacceptable. And we're still doing the federal government's bidding by sending Tamar Leach back to Ottawa. We can't be doing that. But this is the reason why we need to have an Alberta Sovereignty Act, is so that when the government in Ottawa comes and says, you must do that, we can say, no, that is not our enforcement priority. It's also the reason we need our own Alberta provincial police so that they respond to our policing priorities.
Wow, so much to unpack in that clip, right? Not only should we be giving amnesty, which, by the way, is not a power that any premier has. Premiers can't issue pardons. They're not governors. They're not in the United States. There's no amnesty that a premier can issue. It's simply not a thing. But we went up from amnesty. Not just amnesty. We need to do compensation as well. And that's where we heard, for one of the first times in Danielle Smith's campaign, where she talked about the importance of having a provincial police that would follow her direction. So again, we have this theme of Danielle Smith wants control of all of the levers of power so she can direct them to do as she sees fit. But, that was just a campaign. Just a campaign. People, they say things during political campaigns. Once somebody's elected, things change, right? Let's take a look what Danielle Smith had to say with her buddy Derek Fildebrandt right after she took not just the role of leader, but also as premier.
Be willing to consider a, if I could rephrase Ryan's question, a sort of a pardon program to have people reimbursed for these charges and their legal costs and this kind of thing?
I love the sounds of that. There's sort of 2 categories, though. There are instances that rose to a level of criminal prosecution, and I have to let that process play out. I think it would be inappropriate for me to step in if there's a criminal prosecution. Mm-hmm. In the case of firearms, for instance, or if there was an assault, those kind of processes have to play out.
Yeah.
But when it comes to fines for a pastor, I mean, I have to tell you, the criminal code gives protection for pastors. You are not allowed to interrupt a sermon. That's how seriously we take the role of our men and women who wear the cloth. And so I think that there was an error made in that regard. I'm trying to figure out where that lies. I don't think it lies in the Justice Department. I think that lies in the Health Department. And so there was a whole crew of enforcement officers led by teams of AHS inspectors. And I will, as soon as I can find out what the status of those, my intention would be to deliver a blanket amnesty. That was inappropriate political decisions that led to that inappropriate enforcement. And so it seems to me it's a political decision to say, we made a mistake, we're sorry, won't happen again.
There again, amnesty. Danielle Smith is going to interfere in the regular proceedings of the courts. She's going to interfere in the Crown prosecutors. She's going to do all of the things. Pretty consistent messaging here. She's got every intention of meddling with the application of justice, not letting that process go through the courts as it should, because her judgment is final. It's the very, very best. But, you know, that was at the beginning of her tenure as premier. Let's move on from there. She did a little interview right before the holidays. It was a year-end interview with her buddy Ezra from The Rebel. This is where she was also pretty explicitly clear who she's been talking to and what she's been talking to them about.
About how our justice system works in watching things at the federal level, and how the Attorney General and the Crown have an independence from the Premier's office. The questions that I can ask and have asked and continue to ask is it in the public interest?
Yeah.
And is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction?
Yeah.
And I think the longer that we go on seeing that prosecutions are not being successful, it makes a stronger case.
Yeah.
On both of those fronts, that if the conviction isn't likely, we know that we have a lot of pressure on our courts.
Yeah.
And if the public has now come to terms with wanting a different approach, is it in the public interest? It's becoming increasingly hard to answer those two questions. Now, I put it to the prosecutors, and I've asked them to do a review of the cases with those two things in mind, and I'm hopeful that we'll see a true turning of the page, because I think you're very right that something changed in February when the Freedom Convoy took place. That I think people realize that now we know more about this virus, we have more effective means to be able to address it. That some of the extreme measures that may have had a lot of widespread support early on, they just don't have the same widespread support today. And so, do you continue on in prosecuting when the public has moved on? That's the big question that the Crown has got to come to terms with.
Now, Danielle Smith does an incredible job of displaying not knowing what public interest is. Public interest isn't determined by polling. What she's talking about is whether or not there's overwhelming public support. The question of public interest is way more complicated than that, and certainly not the one that I'm going to get into. But the prevailing sentiment of the moment is not what decides whether or not something is legal or illegal or should be prosecuted or should not be prosecuted. That's not how it works. It's way more complicated. But Danielle Smith was happy to sit there with her buddy Ezra and pontificate at length with her great legal knowledge about public interest and likelihood of conviction. But let's go back and highlight just the one part that's really, really important in this conversation.
I put it to the prosecutors, and I've asked them to do a review of the cases with those two things in mind.
So not only has she put it to the prosecutors, she's apparently also directed the prosecutors to do some sort of review of all of the cases that had to do with COVID-19 and the health measures and the people who chose to willfully violate them or other things. It's pretty clear. She doesn't mince any words there. So all of this came up again after Smith's comments at her press conference earlier in the week. And things got really interesting and really dramatic from there. On January 12th, we saw a statement from the Ministry of Justice where they said Premier Smith's comments reflect the prosecutorial standard and reflect the independence of Crown prosecutors to assess these As agents of the Attorney General, Crown prosecutors report on individual prosecutions to the Minister of Justice solely in his role as Attorney General, and the Deputy Minister solely in his role as Deputy Attorney General. Following this process is essential to preserving the independence of the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service. And in keeping with the processes, the Premier has never spoken with any Crown prosecutors about any court legal matters that they deal with. Suggesting otherwise may undermine public faith in the administration of justice. You don't say. The idea that an elected official would be able to determine who gets charged and who doesn't would not only be deeply undermining to the confidence of the people's ability to have confidence in the justice system. It's a dictatorship at that point. When elected officials get to decide who goes to court, who goes to jail, who doesn't, especially given that their own governments may from time to time be under investigation, when they get to determine who's immune and who's prosecuted, we've crossed over into some deeply dangerous territory. And this is exactly what Danielle Smith has been promising to do since day one. Now, Danielle Smith very quickly started to realize that she was getting into some hot water. She tried to say that she was imprecise. It was imprecise language. Now, first of all, imprecise is a word that you use when you're aiming for something, but you miss it by just a little bit. So you can be imprecise in a game of horseshoes. You're still playing horseshoes. You can be imprecise in a game of darts or bowling or pool, but you're still playing that game. So she may have been imprecise, but she was still very openly trying to influence prosecutions, which is a huge problem. She came out, before we get to Ms. Smith's statement, we'll move along to the next statement that came out. This came out on January 13th from the Alberta Crown Attorneys Association. And this statement, just as damning. Prosecutorial independence is fundamental to the role of Crown prosecutors. It is a central component of an open and fair justice system in a democratic society. As Crown prosecutors, we are duty-bound to apply a two-part standard throughout every prosecution, whether there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction and whether the proceeding is in the public interest. The Alberta Crown Prosecutions Service's Code of Conduct emphasizes the importance of Crown prosecutors being able to and being directed to perform their duties independent of political or other improper external influences, like, I don't know, the Premier of Alberta. Our association is not aware of any case where an elected official has attempted to contact a specific Crown prosecutor to inquire about a prosecution. Our members have and will continue to discharge their ethical obligations in accordance with principles and standards referenced above. So again, we have the legal expert saying, so that thing that you're asking us to do, that we do with every single case, you've never actually asked us to do it. Nobody's heard from you. Why are you? Well, they stopped short of asking the question that we're going to ask, which is, why was Danielle Smith lying about this? And it's a really important question because she's very clearly lying about this. Now, the NDP followed up on this by saying, you know what? This is not okay. There's a judicial interference question that needs to be answered here because Smith's comments are deeply, deeply problematic. Not even if they're not true, which by accounts of everyone other than Smith appear to be that they're not true. Even if they're not true, they still show a willingness to try to interfere in the normal flow of justice. That's a really big problem. Well, eventually Danielle Smith did, in fact, release her own statement on January 13th. I've had discussions with the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General and asked them to look into what options were available with respect to outstanding COVID-related cases. They advised me Crown prosecutors would independently make their decisions on whether or not to carry on with COVID-related cases based on their assessment of whether or not there was a reasonable chance of conviction and whether or not it was the public interest. I respect that independent process. While my language may have been imprecise in these instances, I was referring to the process and discussions above and the advice I received from the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General. At no time have I communicated with Crown prosecutors. We're going to play that clip one more time.
I put it to the prosecutors, and I've asked them to do a review of the cases with those two things in mind.
She went to the Crown prosecutors by her own words. That's just the one example. We've served up several tonight where she said her intent is to administer amnesty or compensation. There's multiple examples we've provided tonight where she says, I want to mess with the Crown prosecutors. I've talked to them. She literally uses the term Crown prosecutors. That's not a matter of imprecision. And the statement is incredibly difficult to believe. But she doubled down on it on her radio show on Saturday.
Of course, I've never called a Crown prosecutor. You're not allowed to do that as a politician. Everyone knows that. And I took legal advice when I first got elected to find out if there was anything I could do to address issues that I'm quite concerned about, is the prosecution of those who were had been charged during COVID. I think everyone knows my views on that. And the advice I was given is that the only thing a Crown prosecutor can consider is whether there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction and whether it's in the public interest. When I have raised, the only person I can raise this with as well, this is again very well known. You can talk to your Attorney General and their deputy. And so I wanted to ask them if they had looked at these cases in that light. They confirmed that that is the measure that Crown prosecutors use when they're looking at these cases. Reasonable likelihood of conviction, if it's in the public interest, and we're letting the court process play out. So I may have used some imprecise language, but my contact with the Justice Department has always been through the appropriate channels, and that's the Attorney General.
All right. So in other words, no need for an investigation, independent or otherwise, because you just said everything that you say is under scrutiny and you've got to go through the proper channels.
You have to. Everyone knows that. And I would say that the department has confirmed I have not talked to Crown prosecutors, and the association itself has issued a statement saying I have not talked to Crown prosecutors. My language may have been imprecise. I was referring to the Justice Department. My contact there has always been through the Attorney General.
So the problem is, no, that's just not true. The reality is what she said at all. She was very, very clear. And as much as she can say, oh, everybody knows that you can't do that, she said it from the beginning of her campaign that she was going to try to use the imaginary powers of the Premier's office to issue amnesty, to issue compensation. This has been her jam since day one. It's ridiculous that she serves up the statements from the Justice Department and from the Crown Prosecutors Association to say, oh, no, look, those guys said it didn't happen. It's almost as if those associations are exercising their professional responsibility to maintain the integrity of the work that they do by saying, whoa, 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 that hasn't happened here. It's also worth noting those statements came out before Smith's. The correction came after she got caught. As we've said on the show many times, Danielle Smith lies a lot. And she got caught lying here. Now, there's a lot of really big questions that still need to be asked. One of the biggest ones is perhaps, why would she lie about doing the bad thing? Most people, when they're presented with being caught doing something bad, they'll lie and say, oh no, I didn't do the bad thing, I did the good thing. But in this situation, rather than Smith say, you know what, I know that I said that I was going to do these things, turns out I can't, I didn't, sorry guys. Guess you kind of got screwed, all of my anti-vax supporters from day one. Thanks for the leadership, but you're not getting any of the things that I promised you. Instead of saying that, she said, oh no, I talked to the Crown prosecutors. Yeah, no, I do that. She told Others Relevant that. She told the Western Standard that in so many words. She told an entire room of reporters at a press conference that. This isn't imprecise language. This is repeated language. Now, you have to know that there's some kickers to this story. The first one is when we think about who Danielle Smith is referring to when she talks about the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General and his recommendations and his judgment for her, it's important to remember that we're talking about Tyler Shandro. Tyler Shandro, the same guy who said when the Sovereignty Act was initially presented, no, guys, it's solid. There's no legal problems here. Stood up at a press conference and said that. And then we saw less than a week later, massive revisions because it was wildly unconstitutional and wildly illegal. But it's also important to remember that we're talking about this guy. We're only a couple of weeks away, like a week and a half away from Tyler Shandro's conduct hearings at the Law Society. So some of you might remember a little while back, Mr. Shandro got himself into some hot water for a couple of different things. And his hearings are scheduled for January 24th. And there were three major complaints that were launched against him. The first one was that he attended the private residence of a member of the public, behaved inappropriately by behaving in conduct that brings the reputation of the profession into disrepute, and that such conduct is deserving of sanctions. It is also alleged that Tyler Shandro used his position as Minister of Health to obtain personal cell phone numbers, contacted one or more members of the public outside of regular working hours using that information, and that conduct is, and as such, that conduct is deserving of sanction. And it is alleged that Tyler Shandro responded to an email from a member of the public addressed to his wife by threatening to refer that individual to authorities if they did not address future correspondence to his office as Minister of Health, and that such conduct is deserving of sanction. So that's Tyler. He's got some stuff going on this month. Maybe that's why the legislature is not coming back in session anytime soon. But there's something going on with the justice ministers, because it's important to remember that Tyler Shandro didn't start off as justice minister. No. He started off as Minister of Health. Let's see. Who was the justice minister before Tyler Shandro? Oh, right. This guy, Casey Madhu. Some of you might remember there was a bit of a scandal regarding Casey Madhu that saw him leave the justice ministry because he got a $300 ticket for driving distracted in, I believe it was a playground zone. He got up in the officer's face and tried to intimate, according to some reports, that it was a result of racial profiling and not driving while on a cell phone in a playground zone. And then he called the chief of police, which resulted in him getting booted as Minister of Justice. And it's important to note, we're not at the speculation phase right now. There was an investigation and there was a report written. And what did that report say? It said that he did attempt to interfere with the administration of justice. It said that there was a reasonable perception that he attempted to interfere with the administration of justice. The only thing that kept him from being unsuccessful was the fact that the chief of police that he called put an end to it real quick. So he wasn't successful because he wasn't able to wield his influence in the way that he very clearly wanted to wield it. But the report and the investigation were very, very clear. He tried to. So, looking at the history of justice ministers, we have Mr. Madhu, who lost the job because he tried to abuse his power. Shandro was then appointed, despite the fact that he has a Law Society hearing in place for trying to abuse his power, allegedly. And then we have Danielle Smith, who has spent the last 5 days talking about nothing but the fact that she imprecisely tried to abuse her power. There's one more kicker. You have to know there's one more kicker. Danielle Smith said, everybody knows you can't do these things. Everybody knows you can't do these things. It's ridiculous. Who would try to do these things? And there's some people who have said, well, maybe Danielle Smith didn't know that you shouldn't try to influence your attorney general or your minister of justice. Maybe Danielle Smith didn't know that you shouldn't talk to Crown prosecutors. Maybe Danielle Smith didn't know that these sorts of things are so serious that they should have an independent investigation. despite the fact that you just heard on a radio, she was just like, no, there's no need for an independent investigation. Let's ask, I don't know, Danielle Smith.
About how our justice system works in watching things at the federal level and how the Attorney General and the Crown have an independence from.
I don't know what happened. They were going to try that again.
About how our justice system works in watching things at the federal level and how the Attorney General and the Crown.
For some reason, that clip isn't working, which is really disappointing because it's a good clip. So give me 2 seconds here, and I'm just going to bump it back over because we did some digging and we were able to find a bit where Danielle Smith was very clear that she believes that these sorts of things are really, really bad and that these sorts of things do, in fact, need to have serious investigation. So, down a second. We'll get that puppy loaded up here, and we'll get it played for you because it really is worth it. I don't know why the audio is being squirrely. And in just a second as well, we're going to be joined by Sarah Biggs, who's going to help us make some sense out of this, as well as some of the other interesting things that that came out of this. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that clip to load, there's one other thing that I quickly just want to highlight, and this comes from the National Post. This is where the story where Smith says she urged minister to consider whether COVID prosecutions could succeed. This came out on January 14th. And what's really interesting about this story is it seems to highlight another lie from Danielle Smith. One of the things that Danielle Smith talked about at the beginning of her tenure was she talked about how if there were people who were still having mask requirements or health requirements or vaccine requirements, then she would call them personally. And she cited an example where she said that she had called the, let me make sure I get this right, the Arctic Winter Games. So Smith said her government had contacted the Arctic Winter Games and convinced event organizers to drop their vaccine mandate, which again is using the power of the Premier's office to generate influence and is probably more than a little problematic. Here's the problem. John Rhoda, committee president of the game, said at the time he was not aware of any such call and said the committee made the decision to remove the vaccine mandate without any outside coaxing. So there's another fun little piece of honesty. But going back to where I was trying to get to before the wheels fell off with the audio being weird, let's ask Danielle Smith about the importance of distance between Crown prosecutors and government.
Independence of the Justice Minister, Attorney General, is so important that they don't even sit with the governing caucus after they have been appointed. Because when you think about it, if you're going to be the top lawyer of the land and you're going to be called upon to question government wrongdoing, you're very likely going to have to question people who are making the decisions to either give out multi-billion-dollar contracts or stop prosecution on cases, and those are going to be government members. You have to have an independent person in this role, and I think, unfortunately, the new Justice Minister has demonstrated that they're just going to be a lapdog defending the government's interest on this one. So I'm glad to see that it's going to a committee. We'll be able to see as Canadians how this process plays out. I think if anything warrants a Mueller committee-style investigation, it's certainly this, and we'll see if we can get to the bottom of it.
Okay, you dropped the Mueller name there. Indeed. Oh my goodness, yes you did.
But that's the difference in our two systems, right? I mean, in the U.S., you've got a truly independent investigator looking at malfeasance at the highest office in the land. That's exactly what we need here.
That's exactly what we need here. For the first time in a long time, I find myself agreeing with Danielle Smith. Those comments are from 2019 during the SNC-Lavalin controversy, where there was concern that the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, had used his office to try to influence a prosecution inappropriately. It sure seems like back in 2019, a scant 2.5 years before she decided to run for the UCP leadership, Danielle Smith understood that it's critically important that government doesn't interfere with independent prosecutors. It sure seems like Danielle Smith understood that even at the slightest whiff that may have occurred, a Mueller-style independent prosecution should immediately be initiated, because people need to know that they can trust their justice system. People need to know they can trust the integrity of the justice system, and that politicians who have vested interests, not only in protecting themselves or their friends or their own governments, should not be the people making the decisions about what should or shouldn't be prosecuted. It seems like Danielle Smith had a real firm grasp of that right up until it became more convenient for her to weaponize people coming out of the pandemic who were angry and afraid, so she could use them to coast to her own victory as the new leader of the UCP. But that's the question. Which one is it? Which one could it possibly be? Is Danielle Smith so craven that she will manipulate people who are already, if not already radicalized, on the very edge of it for her own gain by lying to them about what she'll do for them, knowing that she doesn't have those powers? Or didn't she? And if she didn't, what's the alternative here? How do we get from a place where Danielle Smith from 2.5 years ago knew that that sort of thing was completely inappropriate? It was corrosive to democracy. And then all of a sudden, as soon as she just got a slight whiff of power, all of that fell away. And she was willing to completely compromise not only her principles, but people's ability to have faith in an independent prosecutor. And then to try to write all of that off with the vague language of, I was imprecise. I know I used that exact term on more than one occasion in exactly the same way. I was just being consistently imprecise. Danielle Smith's right. There absolutely should be an independent investigation in this, because people need to know exactly what's happened. We are in the process, by the way, another little shout out to our Patreon folks who are in the process of submitting a couple FOIP requests. I'm sure they'll come back heavily redacted, but we're looking to see what conversations took place, when and where. It's a pretty short FOIP request. It's only been a couple of months that she's been in office, but we will absolutely update you as soon as we hear from you on that. One other quick thing before we bring the incomparable Sarah Biggs into the mix, because there's been some fascinating fallout that seems to have occurred as all of this has been playing out. We had some very interesting conversations with some, let's go with very interesting folks yesterday. And they were talking about the situation inside the UCP caucus room. Apparently, the rumor is, unsubstantiated rumor, I probably have to say that right out of the get-go. The rest of this is all unsubstantiated rumors, so please don't threaten to sue me anymore. But the unsubstantiated rumors, there's actually two unsubstantiated rumors that are very interesting. The first one is caucus is apparently super fractured right now. There are a lot of people who are looking at how Danielle Smith is speaking, how Danielle Smith is governing, and they're going, oh, but there's an election coming, Danny, and you're kind of killing us all here. We're going to end up at best as opposition if you don't get it together, and please stop being crazy with the crazy talk, because it's not good. A lot of people trying to put the brakes on Danielle Smith from inside of caucus. There's a lot of people who are really uncertain about what their future with the UCP is going to look like. We heard from, like I said, multiple people yesterday. We put up a little thread, and we got a very interesting response to this little thread coming from none other than ex-Deputy Premier Thomas Lukasik. So he retweeted our little thread, confirming apparently exactly what we said. Maybe Danielle Smith indeed has problems when her cabinet ministers exchange among themselves messages like this one, and then included a screen capture of a DM where it says, it would be easy to leave, to stay, not so easy when I see something that has been said that is unacceptable from my new leader. Honestly, is she going to lead this party in the next election? I don't know. Do you? Won't be me, but who? A good opposition is as important as a good government. So you have Mr. Lukasik tweeting out this conversation apparently coming from a minister. So we're not just talking about caucus anymore. We're talking about a minister saying, I don't know what's going to happen, man. I don't even know if she's going to be leading us in the next election. That's how tenuous are. One of the things that we heard yesterday is there's already a couple of camps that are trying to set up to maybe have to take over the leadership when the wheels come off of the Danielle Smith show, the Danielle Smith train, whatever we want to call it, because apparently that check's in the mail. So that's our first fun little unsubstantiated rumor. I'm going to pick Sarah's brain on that a whole bunch in just a sec. But the other one that we just wanted to mention, because it's fun and it's so very on brand, is we've now received a couple of anonymous, totally unsubstantiated DMs from folks who have some fascinating insights as to what's going on at certain sporting events. Apparently, there's a whole bunch of high-ranking Danielle Smith staffers who are getting the golden ticket access to sporting events by big deal people inside of these sporting groups. They're being brought up to the executive suites. They're getting the drinks. They're getting the fancy cheese, the fancy crackers, all the things. Not paying for it, apparently. That's what we're told. Don't know if it's true. That's what we're told. Which, again, has some really fascinating and interesting implications, because that is a violation of some pretty big rules. And it would be super weird, even more inappropriate, some people might say, if Danielle Smith's senior advisors, senior staffers are getting these golden tickets to these high-end seats at these sporting events at the same time that Danielle Smith's talking about how bad Calgary needs a new arena. Boy, that'd be complicated. Boy, it would really be complicated if she happened to be the previous president of a group that has really close ties to those same sporting organizations that were trying to get a new arena just a couple of years ago before the deal fell apart. That would be really complicated. That would probably require a whole lot to unwind. I guess we'll see what happens with that. But getting into the analysis part and not just the punditry, bringing into the show now, Sarah Biggs. Sarah, how are you doing tonight? I can't hear you at all.
I'm always on mute. It's Sunday. How are you?
I'm having fun tonight. Are you? I am.
Good.
Little one video didn't hit at the moment that I wanted it to, because I had it teed up so perfectly. I might edit that in post. But yeah.
It's been a week. I came home yesterday from Edmonton. I'm just exhausted. It was interesting.
Busy little week in Edmonton.
Just a little bit.
There we go.
Just a little bit.
So let's start from the top.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Mr. Fleury this week?
I have him blocked for my whole mental health. Oh yeah. After he sent all the goobers after me, after my stand on CBC about the Trudeau inquiry, it was a block day.
Well, let me just throw it up on the screen so you can really treasure it, because this is again where Theo Fleury retweets the Western Standard PitchBot as a source of authority there.
Everybody's reading skills is different, or critical analysis, or be able to perceive misinformation. We'll just Tim Caulfield has a very, very good class on Coursera with the University of Alberta on how to try to sort through the noise and try to distinguish between real information, misinformation. Maybe he wants to take that class. I think.
I'm curious if Dr. Caulfield has a slide in that says, if it says PitchBot, it's probably not real.
No,
I don't know.
I don't think that's pretty theoretical. But Theo is I was going to say national treasure. Theo, he fell off the deep end. I feel bad for him.
And that's the thing. I do feel bad for him too, because
they're using him, man. They're using him, and it's disgusting. Like, sorry, I called them the goobers. Shout out to my friend Jay Gamble for that. Sorry, but at the end of the day, how ridiculous. So within hours of Lisa Marie Presley dying this week, it was the vaccine. Okay, she had drug abuse history, heart disease history in her family, because if we all
And
remember,
herself.
And herself too. And
and she's a
things
woman
happen.
and she's 54. So like bad things happen sometimes. It's
Bad
just
things happen sometimes. But
and it's worth noting that she had, and in no way am I trying to say anything other than just acknowledge the last couple of years for her have been a real
rough. She lost her son. She's been grieving a lot. She separated. A whole bunch of stuff happened. But it's everybody dies of heart arrest, guys, because that's how it works.
When they said this was one of the things that I was just like, oh, come on.
I cannot even anymore.
Gross?
Everybody goes into cardiac arrest.
Well, when they're like, they gave epinephrine and she was in cardiac arrest. Anybody who spent any time in medicine went, well, yeah, because that's what you do.
Like, sometimes you push 6. Like, sometimes you push so many because you're really, Nate, like.
It's just so exploitive is what it comes down to.
I remember when I had to push an epi, and the doctor was like, let's push another one. I was like, look, okay. And then push another one, push another one, push another one. Let's bring on the pads. Push another one, push another one. Okay, I think now we call it quit because it's been 7 or 8, right? Epinephrine is used. It is a medicine. It is used for multiple uses, including allergic reactions.
It's true. It's such a nothing burger.
That's why you go into trauma room when they give you epinephrine, because they need to monitor your heart.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't know that.
They should be less gross, is all I'm saying. Let's get into the big stuff. So from a comms management standpoint, Danielle Smith stands up and she says, you know what? I've been talking to Crown prosecutors. I've been telling them how to do their job. Some days, maybe I wake up Rob Anderson, make sure that he set his alarm clock. Maybe I lay his clothes out for him, because apparently she has to tell everybody how to do the bare minimum of what their job is. And it turns into an unmitigated shitstorm.
It's a shit show.
On a scale of 1 to 10, Sarah, how well did the UCP? I'm not even going to go UCP. I'm gonna nail this down a little bit farther. How well did the Danielle Smith issues managers, the comms team, do in handling this thing?
I feel bad. So I know a few people in there that work for her. I feel bad for one of them. I feel bad for Becca. And she has to deal with.
But is that really relevant?
No. -5.
That was a relevant joke because
I know it's not.
Not
sorry, I didn't get it. It's been a long week. Sorry. But so I feel bad for Becca. I feel, it's 2023, man. It's not 1951. Guys, what are we doing here? Like, she's an adult. She's a communicator. She's a showbiz person. She knows that words have impact. She's the first one to understand impact of her words. So was she trying to impress Ezra? Hi, Ezra. He blocked me on Twitter. I don't know. Maybe Kian's going to go after me tonight. Who knows? But was she trying to impress her base? Was she trying to impress viewers and try to show that, she's really trying? It was a little nudge to the base. It was a huge middle finger to the rest of the province. And then, we're going to have to give her a thesaurus, because it's getting heavy. Like, how unprofessional do you have to be to do not understand how the impact of what impact your words can have?
To me,
like, that's the first thing in comms. Like, when I write a press release for my client, Nate, sometimes I'm going to go over one name 50 times, because maybe I went a little too far. Maybe it could imply something else. Maybe it could bring another argument or sub-argument later. You need clarity. you need to be the utmost. The clarity is, I can't, like, each word has consequences. A comma is not put in right place. Like, everything counts. And it's like, if, like,
Especially if you add an E to the word premier. Oh, don't do that. Not saying, just saying. That's a bit of an inside joke for probably like 3 of our listeners, but it's funny, I promise.
It's okay. But, it's very, sorry, I'm on baby monitor duty tonight. See how you
Gotcha.
do, my baby. So, but no, it's, Albertans deserve to have clarity. Albertans deserve to have competence, and a very solid government is willing to support them. Right now, and I'm gonna throw salt in the wound, but I'm going to say this. The more we keep going, the more we keep looking at what's happening, I am questioning myself if Danielle Smith cares about Alberta at all. Does she care winning about the election, or she cares more about her ideology and ramming it through? That is what I'm questioning right now. Where are we sitting? Because don't get me wrong, Albertans deserve better. And when a premier is actively communicating in a wrongful manner, trying to create battles where, like with the healthcare stuff, they could just go to the Constitution, Section 7 the feds, and then it would be like, you have to fund us, Section 7 Constitution. But they are not putting any rational thoughts into any of their actions. It's always extremely impulsive. They're leading the province right now, and they're leading the province in a way that's going to be more harmful than helpful. I'm hearing she's prepping, something of a gun law. God forbid, Jesus takes the wheel on that one. But we deserve so much better, Nate. And I'm just tired of the incompetency and the gaslighting and the lies and the contradictions. And every day is another shit show. Every day is a crisis management problem. Every day is a clarification. We got 3 different clarifications on one issue. Why? Because she sat with Ezra Levant for her New Year's interview. Let's be honest, she didn't say the same thing to Markusoff, though. We need to, sorry, I lost my headphone here. We need to be mindful that she didn't say that to Markusoff when interviewed her on New Year's for his New Year's Eve. She is signaling to her base because they're probably hoping that they're not going to go any further than, well, she said that with Ezra, so it's good enough for us.
But that's the thing, like even this is what I find so fascinating about Danielle Smith. And I say this as somebody who has over the last 3 days had to sit through a mind-numbing amount of video footage to make sure that we had enough for the earlier segment in the show. Her body language is so, like, I would pay money to play poker with her. I would pay real money and I would make it all back and then some, because she telegraphs everything. Even in the interview with like the 2 moments that I keep going back to for like, wow, she's not even trying anymore. In one of her very first press conferences, Rick Bell asked her a question and he made a comment about normally I don't have to wait. And she could not contain her laughter and her borderline contempt as she was, as the camera is on her during the press conference. And even during the interview with Ezra Levant, the posture that she has, the way that everything is like, well, Ezra, let me tell you, I know all the things. I'm leaning way back in my chair. I'm totally in control of everything. And I'm going to explain this to you like you're a 4-year-old. Your job is to nod and go, which he did an amazing job of. Like he crushed his role in that. But it's
well, they went to university together, right?
But it's fascinating to me how she will, there doesn't seem to be any kind of filter whatsoever. And I know we talked about this before, but it seems like that's the thing that keeps getting her into so much trouble, is that she'll say whatever little thought bubbles up into her head at any little moment. And if she has a talking point that she knows she's gotten a positive response from before, it's like this Pavlovian reflex where she's like, oh, when I said amnesty, they liked it, so I'm going to say it again. And then she does. And she doesn't seem to have any mind at all for what the potential consequences of that are, to your point about how words matter.
They need to keep her on script, man. They need to keep her on toe if they want to be able to save this. I know that there's, a caucus is putting out a different public face at what is happening right now, but at some point, where are the small c conservatives that usually do not believe for that kind of bullcrap? Where are they? Why are they not signing up? Where, I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for what I'm going to say tonight, but she is not a conservative. She is not. This needs to stop. She's not a conservative. She's a libertarian flirting with populism at a very, very, very high level. And this concerns me. There's no analysis in any of their communications. Her executive, whatever Anderson is, posts gas stoves now on Twitter when all of our emergencies in rural Alberta is fucking closed. Women have to drive 200 kilometers to get Nipidrall, and the baby could be born inside a highway. God forbid if something happens. We have bigger problems, Rob. But he can't take his head out of stush and really try to get in touch. This week, they did something good. The transition fund in Edmonton for homeless people. That is good. But the government have a storytelling problem. All the attention is on Smith, and it needs to stop.
Well, will she let it stop? Because it's Danielle Smith's show. That's what it's always been.
No, she won't. But that's what I'm saying. She does not care about anyone but Danielle Smith. And that is the issue right now. When you are going in those kind of positions, when we do the work we do, it's because not all of us, but a lot of us believe in the greater good. We try to use our influence. We try to use our skills to make society better and to leave an Alberta in 50 years is not going to look like Detroit, but we're going to have jobs. We're going to have a good education system. I was talking to a very, very old stock conservative this weekend. He's been PC forever and ever. Old stock conservative, president of a constituency association for the UCP. And he was like, Sarah, what happened to we care about our vulnerable, about our kids, about a good public healthcare system, and good old values? Respect each other, love each other, and just give out a hand. Where did that go? Everybody just turned into their lone bubble. Everybody became so selfish, politically selfish. But somebody lied their way through to the premier seat. And I've seen it. I had the first row, and I've seen it. And it breaks my heart to see how goddamn disingenuous everything has become. It's turned into a clown show. Just for an example, yesterday somebody came, my friend, and was like, well, you're going to vote for her. Really, dude? Really? Stop putting everybody in the same goddamn basket. I'm tired of that shit. We're not all Danielle Smith fans. We don't support her. A lot of us are getting, kind of rejected from the UCP bubble right now because we don't believe in what they're doing. But there's good ministers in there, but they are shackled and they are controlled. And, Ryan Hassman quit. Well, that's another, the great taco debate. But he was his director of policy. He was her director of policy.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I do want to get into that.
From what I'm hearing, yeah.
Go ahead.
From what I'm hearing, so I heard Thursday night that he might go, and then Friday morning, 9:00, he had out resignation and said, "See ya."
So here's my thing. He put up a very respectful, very professional little thread where he was like, hey, everybody, so long. Thanks for all the fish. And, let's be clear. Mr. Hassman has a lot of friends on both sides of the aisle. He did do the Dave Berta podcast with Dave Cornier for a good chunk of time. I listened to that podcast back in the day. I enjoyed it. I disagreed with a lot of things that Ryan had to say on that podcast, but I still enjoyed listening to it because opinions are fun to listen to. Sometimes you learn. But he has been involved in some pretty contentious issues. He has been involved in some pretty contentious things. And so we did a little bit of a hey, you know what? That's not insignificant. Because the reality is, for people who aren't familiar, he was Rajan Sawhney's chief of staff for a very long time. And Rajan Sawhney has nothing but good things to say about this guy. Publicly, she's all over what a good job he did for her in the ministry. So I'm not dunking on anybody here. Let's be clear. But when you have somebody who moves from a chief of staff role and from a caucus, high-level caucus role to what many people would probably perceive as a promotion, being the was chief advisor to policy to the Premier of Alberta, I think was the title.
Policy.
Something like that.
Director of policy.
There we go. For the Premier. When he goes into that role for 3 months, and then during the week that Danielle Smith does her whole, I'm going to tell the Justice Department what to do. He says at the end of that week, he's like, okay, guys, thanks. It was stunning to me how many people were like, oh, it's not a big deal. A senior staffer for the Premier of Alberta, the guy in charge of policy, after like 4 weeks of policy show, pieces out, and that's not worth talking about? Am I getting it wrong?
They're going to be like, no, nothing to see here. Just move on. Of course they will.
Of course
he put up. Because, well, and that was fascinating because it was the opposition, right, that came at it first. It was very interesting to see.
That was wild to me. Like when we have a senior I don't know if senior, but like an NDP staffer coming out and being like, oh no, it's not a big deal that the director of policy to the Premier of Alberta has just left. It doesn't mean anything. I was like, I did not have that on my bingo card today.
Well, you know, what I was in meeting Friday morning when I heard he was gone, I was like, what? And everybody was like, uh-oh. And I was like, yeah, it's not great. The optics are not great. So, you know, kudos to him. He kept it professional until the end.
For sure.
Like, we'll give him that. He had class. And, you know, I even congratulated Danielle Smith on her election because I had to be a good player. Because I had to, right? But it's not good, man. I know there's a lot of normal people in there trying to keep the glue together. And then running out of glue. A lot. So we'll see how it goes.
There's a whole lot of glue to hold that whole thing together, I can only imagine. But so here's the question. To me, and again, I'm just the dude with the podcast, but to me, I'm looking at this situation with Smith, and I find myself asking the same question that I keep asking you over and over and over again. Why doesn't she just make this stuff go away? To me, the easiest way to resolve this would be to say, hey, you know what? I misspoke. I did it a bunch of times and it was in line with what I campaigned on. I can totally get why people would be concerned and not have confidence. So you know what? We are going to get an independent investigator to come take a look at all the communications that I've had between myself and Minister Shandro and make sure that everybody knows exactly what's going on. So there's no confusion because I want you to believe in me. That to me would be the easiest way to make it go away. But I feel like we're not going to see that.
Nate, I'm going to say the same thing over and over again. A, accountability and non-existent. B, she has a team of validators and enablers around her, and I'm going to keep telling you, oh no, you're doing a great job. This is amazing. This is good. Because somebody had to write that damn statement. And somebody had to push it to the media. And somebody had to approve it. So who you surround yourself with is very telling. And the way and the maturity and the mental exercise to be like, and to be able to sound sincere when you say, no, you know what? I messed up. It is not there right now. There's no room for that. It's her way or the highway. Thank you very much. And again, she does not care. She cares only about the issues that Daniel wants to move forward, not what Albertans care about. We care about accountability. We care about, being responsible for finances. She's been spending more money than, a lot of people in the past few years. A lot of government programs don't make any goddamn sense. I think there's going to be a report being released this week. I'm not sure. I think so. We're going to have to keep our eye open on that. But there's no accountability. There's no issue. Look, like the Kraken's been released. What's going to happen with that strain? Like, aren't we not doing anything? Where is the outrage? Yeah.
I have a question. I'm going to ask this on behalf of the comments because somebody in the comments.
I'm not looking in the comments.
Good, don't. I'm reading them. I got it covered. But here's the question. We're talking about the storytelling problem. We're talking about, hey, we need a feel-good distraction. We're talking about the UCP Smith's office. They need to maybe have some victory laps that they could take. That's what we're talking about. Well, it's the weekend, Sarah. Right now, as of recording, it is 9:10 on January 15th, 2023. There's a premiere tonight, but that's not what I want to talk about.
Oh.
Can we talk about Daniel Smith's drug problem again for a second? Because we were supposed to see a shipment of 250,000 bottles landing this weekend. And I want to.
I did not see anything.
I haven't seen anything.
I've been keeping an eye on the plane because I know what to look for because, when COVID-19 test shipments were coming in, anyway, super complicated logistics.
Where's the plane?
It's fine.
Where's the plane, Sarah?
I didn't see anything.
She said it was going to be this weekend. They promised us.
Was it flying over Russia?
Oh, I'm not making that joke. I'm not making that joke.
It's fine. My career in the Premier's office is already ruined, so I don't have anything to lose. But no,
it's a really good point. She is yet again. That was where they said it's going to be coming on this day, going to be here by the weekend. This was after they had said going to be here by Christmas. We're coming through the end of the weekend. All of the UCP comms are talking about the Last of Us is the premiere. I don't even know where to watch it, but I knew it was going to be.
I never watched it. I was just annoyed that the overpass 4th Street was closed.
That's fair. But we're not hearing anything about this.
Good for the economic development, though. That's great. But we also have real issues in the province that are not being communicated, or there is no crisis management addressing those issues. We're just trying to throw little candies here and there. Oh, look, we're great. We have deserts, we have mountains, we have lakes, we have snow. Look how great we are for the movie industry. Meanwhile, if I'm trying to go get Cetafed right now in the pharmacy, if I ever have a sinus problem or COVID again, God forbid, I'm gonna be SOL.
Fair enough.
And so, wait times and doctors.
What do we do about the plane, Sarah?
Give it another month.
You think it'll get here by then?
I'm gonna have to go look at the approval from Health Canada. I haven't had time to dig into it, but what did we say, Nate, when that was announced?
It was going to be an absolute shit show, I think was the ballpark of it.
Ding, 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 ding. I would love to say, I told you so. I've been in those situations before. I had to fix those situations before. Not pleasant. We got it done. But holy shit, if what I think is happening, not cool.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not good.
What are you watching for this week, Sarah Biggs? I mean, it's going to be, I suspect, it's going to be more of the Danielle Smith wants to have her own little autocracy where she can direct her own police force and her own prosecution service and have all of the power and I don't know.
Yeah, that makes me feel
all of the single-use straws that she wants. What are you watching for this week?
Apparently there's going to be a little presser tomorrow.
There's going to
maybe.
Oh yeah, I heard a little something about that.
Keep an eye open around 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. I don't know. Maybe they'll push it now that I said something about it. I heard there might be something coming tomorrow that's going to be released. I'm really hoping that they're going to be keeping her in her office. It's just, Nate, I don't even want to have expectations because I do not. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to deal with. It's like if they're trying to overwhelm us right now with so many mistakes and errors and communication problems. And I feel like they're trying to keep the public, the general population, kind of, feeling slightly overwhelmed, so they can't really keep up with what's happening in government. But the throne speech is in 3 weeks. So I'm going to start taking some bets. We should have you built that retraction counter yet?
I have not, but I should.
Yeah, we need to
How
do
many
that.
times have we? Because we're at 3, as you noted, we're at 3. I feel like the number is going to go up a little bit. So here's what my question is. Like, do you think at some point, like, Chandro is going to be like, oh, I've got enough going on, man?
Yeah, Chandro's busy tomorrow, though.
Okay.
It's lawyer's court tomorrow. It's his audience.
Is his audience? No.
Yeah, tomorrow
No.
morning, 9
No.
a.m. Yeah.
What? No.
Yeah.
It's the 24th.
I thought it was the 16th.
No. I had the
Oh,
graphic
okay.
here. I had the graphic
Sorry.
here just
I thought it was the 16th. My bad. It's next week. Sorry, guys. I'm tired.
Yeah, it's the 24th into the 26th.
Oh, I didn't read properly. I'm sorry.
See, I put up the night. This is why I did
Okay,
the
but still, he's going to be busy with prep. I don't know. It's very, very exhausting trying to make sense out of anything. And it's very, very exhausting to. I've always said that politics is extremely lonely. And politics is getting lonelier and lonelier. And since when trying to do the right thing puts you on the wrong side of history, I do not know. But what I know is that we could fall into an election sooner than later. If she has a really good budget, she's going to be buying votes, man, because usually a budget cycle is around a month. So you run your budget, then you go on tour for 3 weeks to a month when you do it properly. Now, does she feels like, I'm waiting to see some polling numbers and all that, but does she feels like she has enough to call the election? But you know what? Nobody wanted that stupid Alberta Sovereignty Act. Nobody wanted a gun reform.
Well, Rob did. Rob really did.
I don't give a shit about Rob and like, I'm done, man. Like, I'm sorry, not sounding raw, but it's really, really exhausting when you're seeing the consequences of what's happening to different organizations right now and how everybody is exhausted and how everybody's tired. You want to fix your nursing problem? Fund the universities, create a bridge program for LPNs, invest money. You want to help students? Cut the university fees, fund the universities, fund the trades. $1,000 doesn't go anywhere, it barely covers rent. But we are in the time where it's easier, like that $50 a month, we're going to be paying it back this summer because the cap's going to be increased, and they're going to be making their money back. Like, what is happening? What has happened to common sense? Like, I saw some pictures from Take Back Alberta meeting in St. Albert this week. I would say there was at least 200 to 150 people in that room. I am concerned. The dissonance is concerning. Everybody that I'm talking to in the background, the UCP, are worried about the Take Back Alberta slate right now because they are extremely damaging. Extremely damaging. Take back Alberta from what? Taking care of the elders? From what? Teaching culture to our kids? From what? Taking religion out of classroom? From what? Trying to give you a life-saving vaccine so you don't get sick and we don't clog up our healthcare system, but you decided that you were too intelligent and too smart to get the vaccine. So now you decided to drag what, 50,000 Albertans with you down the rabbit hole? I don't call that a service. I call that a disservice, and it is dishonest and disingenuous. I am tired of their shit. I am tired of the rhetoric. I'm tired of, seeing certain group of journalists attacking professional and journalists the way they did this week again. It's fucking disgusting. It's deplorable. What the hell are we doing, guys? What the hell are we doing? From Rachel Gilmore to this TV reporter to everybody else. I'm so sorry, and I really wish I could do more for you. But no one is listening, and no one's willing to pick up the phone. Because we're trying in the background, but nothing's happening. Nobody's listening. Well, yeah, I give my concerns to the premier when I see her, and I listen. And she's not listening. She doesn't care. And it's time to wake up because it's going to hurt in 4 years.
True fact. You want something sincere? Do you want a real moment of real honesty, Sarah Biggs?
Sure.
I feel like I need to lift you up here. You have to know what's coming.
BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
I'm never gonna get tired of that. Oh, I'm never gonna get tired of that.
Did she have a cold that day?
Apparently not. There were a bunch of people who asked, and apparently there were the official response was no, she didn't have a cold. It's the second nod. It's like that I got it right. Like it's just
So I was thinking about something like, when they say what Quebec has, we want. Make university cheap. How about that? Increase help to, increase subsidies, increase help to social programs, increase help everything, because Quebec looks like conservative, and they are conservative, but they are socially responsible. I'll leave you at that.
There we go. Sarah Biggs, you got some comments yourself there tonight. You got a little fiery. It resonated with a few folks. We got a couple of people on Twitter. Sarah's on fire tonight. Got a couple people on your F-bomb requester. Was quite pleased to see that you dropped a few of those. So the swear jar is going to
I have money here. Here.
There we go.
I started saving money.
What are you donating that for? Did you announce what you were going to be putting this money towards?
I'm still thinking about it because there are so many organizations right now that does need help. But I think that, food banks and outreach programs are the ones that everybody needs help. That's the problem.
It's true, though.
I'm going to give it to small grassroots charities, not United Way or, not that stuff. Because when you're spending your donating monies to call me and say, hey, thank you so much for your donation of $25. You know what? You're mismanaging my funds. So I'm not giving money to them. But no, I'm trying to, if anybody has any, suggestions, please let me know.
I'm gonna throw my two in. I have to change the name because it's been changed. Fears Not Love. Used to be the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter.
Yes.
They're amazing. The other group that I personally like to recommend to everybody is the Street Cats YYC, who do the outreach.
Yes. Sunshine is doing a very, very good work. I know they are affiliated. They're like a Christian organization, but they have very, very, very good programs for, women and children facing domestic violence and abuse. And a dear friend of mine is on the board, so that's a good one as well.
Yeah, lots of places.
Yeah.
And as per the minister in charge of the affordability program, if you find yourself in a position where you don't need that $100 per kid, or
don't give it to a political party, guys.
Don't give it to a charity. Give it to a good charity, because not only will you get a better tax receipt than if you give
but you're going to make this province spending double, because you're going to get a tax receipt and they give you the $100.
This is what I'm saying. So it's it's a terrible program that is horribly targeted and is by most measures not great
Oh,
use of
I
money, but we
forgot
can
to
turn
say
it into something
something.
good. Yeah, go ahead.
I forgot to say something. Apparently the premier will be running in Medicine Hat again.
She's going to reuse her signs.
Reuse, recycle, reciprocate? I don't know. What's the triple R's? What's the
No,
third R?
if it was reciprocate, she'd be running closer to the Saddle Dome, I feel like.
Yeah.
Sarah Biggs, I want to say thank you so much for making the time to chat. And I know you're feeling a little bit under the weather, but there were a
I'm
lot
better.
of people who were looking forward to a patented Sarah Biggs rant. And I think they definitely got that tonight. So thank you for that. Here comes the plug. Time to clear the room. As always, if you have the ability and the means, we would love nothing more than if you considered signing up to be one of our Patreon supporters at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for the price of just a fancy cup of coffee or a broken muffin a month, you can help us continue to produce the kind of content that we try to produce here. And we've got some big plans coming up. We're starting the pre-production, if you will, on an episode, a bit. I'm not sure what we're going to call it yet. About a certain, let's go with right-wing media organization. We're starting that up this week, and it's going to be a spicy little meatballs. So stay tuned for that. And it's because of the support that we get from our Patreon sponsors that we're able to get the toys that we need and the FOIP request monies that we need in order to do all this stuff. So if you do have the financial means, please consider signing up. If you don't, totally cool. We get that there's a lot of people out there right now who are struggling. The occasional like and share. And as always, the maybe a little bit of a podcast review if you're listening to the audio version of this, that would be delightful, because if you are watching this on Facebook, you know, apparently they have a name. I didn't know this. They're called the Smithereens. So that's I guess they're getting jackets made or something. But they found us, and the Facebook is a dangerous place. Go there well prepared if you decide to venture there. But they're leaving some unkind reviews on the podcast space. So if you have a minute to finish or to do a review on your favorite podcast platform, that'd be delightful. Other than that, we will be back here on Wednesday, where we will return with the incomparable, profanity-laden Sarah Biggs for analysis of what I'm sure is going to be an interesting week, because there is supposed to be a announcement of sorts, allegedly, tomorrow morning, allegedly, that is either going to be very, very interesting or extraordinarily performative, probably a little bit of both. And apparently it has to do something to do maybe with healthcare. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And it's almost for sure that if Danielle Smith is present for that announcement, that there's going to be some of the amazing journalists who exist in Alberta who are going to have some follow-up questions on the week that we just had. In the meantime, please, everybody, make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. Make sure that you're giving yourself a little bit of time. Stop and have smell the flowers, enjoy a cinnamon roll, whatever the case may be. But make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. And of course, as always, the most important part, keep the conversation going.